X-Men number 17 is a truly odd post-Ten of Swords follow-up, a clear deep breath before Hickman's X-Men moves forward, and one of the first times in the Hickman era of X-Men where I read an issue and thought, well, that could have been in an email. The nascent, rejuvenated X-Men founders Jean Grey and Scott Summers are joined by Aurora Monroe on a mission to Shi'ar space to determine how Empress Zandra Neramani has gone missing. Today I'll answer, what is the controversy around this issue and why are some critics and fans avoiding it altogether? Why X-Men number 17 is such an odd entry in the run? What's next for Storm's big 2021? And theories and predictions for things to come. Hey everybody, I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. You are listening to Krakin Krakoa number 150. If you like the Comic Book Herald YouTube channel or Krakin Krakoa, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, and commenting here. It all helps me out a great deal and will help me get to another 150 issues, which if mathematics are holding up, would take me all the way to Krakin Krakoa number 300. You can find full X-Men and comic book reading orders on comicbookherald.com. Links in the show notes. Spoilers for Discuss Comics will follow. Before we dig into the contents of X-Men number 17, and again more broadly, my theory for where Storm is heading in 2021, it's worth addressing some of the comics community controversy around the issue and the inclusion of artist Bret Booth. I suspect this is something most readers wouldn't really even know about unless you're super plugged into the comics criticism landscape, which as somebody who runs a comic book website, well, yeah, that's kind of my scene. When Booth was announced as artist on X-Men, many critics were immensely disappointed, and sites like Comics XF and the Eisner-winning and frankly incredible Women Write About Comics declared they would not be covering the issue with him involved. Why is this? Well, primarily it dates back to Booth's culpability in a 2014 feud with a prominent female comics critic, which contributed to a truly nasty display of misogyny, threats, and just the absolute worst aspects of people claiming to be comic book fans. While Booth himself didn't knowingly leverage the worst of the harassment directed at this critic, the argument is that he used his platform to encourage that behavior, knowingly or unknowingly. I'll be including a link to the facts of this case so you can read for yourself and determine for yourself how you feel about the events and whether or not this is a creator you want to support. Just absolute full transparency, this issue has weighed on me, and ultimately I feel it's best to share the facts of the situation. Again, because I believe most readers aren't so mired in inside baseball comic controversy that this would even be common knowledge, and let you all interpret the information accordingly. The limited coverage of this that appears to be on YouTube is beyond disingenuous, so if I have to be the one to call it out, so be it. We talk about this a lot on the My Marvelous Year podcast, but in comics there are far too many scenarios where we're talking about art and story we enjoy by creators who have since revealed themselves to have absolutely hateful opinions or enacted a range of real-world harm to the people in their wake. My approach is to make this reality known, but not to tell you how to respond because that is your personal choice and tolerance levels are simply going to vary. I can't put my head in the sand though and pretend there aren't problems just because I love X-Men. And, of course, I would much rather take a journey to Shi'ar space than contemplate online harassment and the mob mentality of various fandoms. It's easier to just not talk about this stuff, but we won't get anywhere that way and comics communities don't improve that way, thus I raise the issue. Getting to the issue, X-Men number 17. Writer Jonathan Hickman, artist Bret Booth, inkers Adelso Corona, colors by Sonny Gao, and letters by Clayton Cowles. Hickman opens the issue with a very quick galactic overview of the state of Marvel Cosmic, likely bouncing off the disruption of Empyre and the new Kree Skrull Empire, and the Snarkwar from the pages of Al Ewing's Guardians of the Galaxy, and the Marvel space age to come in the Ewing cosmic scene. So Hickman here is determining that galactic credit is in a state of upheaval, and it's driving revolution and instability across the cosmos. Now, Hickman kind of digging into the money problems of the Marvel cosmic scene is a very on-brand move for the creator, and honestly, I would say this threat to the galaxy, it's a very Black Monday's murder approach to Marvel, which is pretty interesting. If you're not familiar with Black Monday Murders, it's a highly recommended, if incomplete, series from Hickman and Tom Coker and the team, and you can actually read the first issue for free on Comixology right now, at least in the US. It digs into kind of like money markets and the way that money controls the world, essentially, with some supernatural elements mixed in. It is fantastic, fantastic comics from Image. It's also very proto House and Powers with some of the data pages. I believe Tom Muller would have been involved in design on this series as well. Apologies if that crediting is incorrect. But as I'm recording this, there's all sorts of absolute wildness going on Wall Street and just with like the way that stocks work in America, and Black Monday Murders taps into that vein and then some. So it's a recommended read and also just made me think of what comes up in this issue. As for like the plot itself, well, Zandra, the Empress of the Shi'ar, Shi'ar, she's disappeared. Cyclops and Jean are wearing their X-Factor costumes as they show up with Storm, and they have clearly been called in, I think, by Bobby, likely DaCosta, and Sam Guthrie, Cannonball, who live in Shi'ar space with Sam's wife, Smasher. And they're on the case, right? There are some nice character moments from Hickman here, such as Sam and Bobby getting left behind on the mission because Bobby was busy taking a bath, and Cyclops and Aurora doing their best Legolas, Gimli Two Towers routine, quipping on who gets to count the takeout during their battle with the Shi'ar rebels. Admittedly, too, it is fun to see the whole Smasher Corps bust onto the scene to save the day. We don't often get to see all the Smashers together and, kind of be reminded that, like, within the Shi'ar Guardians, there are sub-Guardians, kind of like, individuals on hold, and there's an entire Smasher Corps, including somebody sporting a dope Tom Selleck mustache. Even apart from the behavior I described to kick off the video, creatively the fill-in by Booth is a huge sidestep from literally everything else in the Krakoa era of X-Men to this point in time. Booth's style is very late 90s, early 2000s, and hey, it's not a secret, like the artist very much wears that on his sleeve. A lot of X fans are going to love that too, with a clear callback to the days of Mark Silvestri and Jim Lee, and eras of X-Men visuals that came to define so much of the look and feel of superhero comics to follow. Whether or not you're into it, and I know a lot of you are, the creative approach feels regressive, deeply so, in an era that is supposed to be anything but. Remember, Krakoa is about the X-Men and mutant kind breaking all the rules and moving out of the morose lost years into reclaiming what makes this franchise special in the Marvel Universe. Attempts to harness the lightning in the bottle of the Image founders in a used bottle that's had the steel broken too many times to count is exactly the kind of retro slip into cheap bad habits that this era of X-Men is supposed to avoid. Now, if this was supposed to be a flashback issue set in 90s X-Men continuity, then I'm all for capturing the spirit and mood of the era visually. There's artistic merit there that I'm actually really into, as captured via pastiche like DC's Dial H for Hero or something like a Black Hammer potentially. And that's where Booth's presence on the upcoming X-Men Legends series with Fabian Nicieza telling an Adam X story actually makes more sense to me, right? Like, you're digging into a story that started in the 90s. There's that potential flashback element of just feeling like, yeah, we're telling a story that existed at a certain period and point in time in X-Men history, in Marvel Comics history. But that's not a part of X-Men number 17's narrative, and instead it just feels like a sore thumb sticking out of the Hickman run in an issue that ultimately moves the needle very little, and not to let Jonathan Hickman off the hook here entirely. I know a lot of you call me out on being a huge fanboy of his, and I love Jonathan Hickman's work very much. But this issue it feels like one of the bigger duds in his X-Men run so far, simply because it just kind of doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. Plot-wise, there's a Stygian assassin. Stygians are a minor but present part of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard historically, who wants to kidnap and execute Zandra for the Shi'ar subjugating their people, right? There's a big Death to Tyrants vibe going on here. They are rebelling, now with like money being really screwed up and galactic credit being messed up. There's more impetus for these races and galactic civilizations that have been under the Shi'ar's heel to fight back. Scott gets knocked down in the battle, like, immediately, which I actually find pretty funny, leaving Storm to step up, showing up her Omega-level mutant goddess prowess, and take out the threat herself. Much like Giant-Size Storm, it is great to see Aurora get to unleash like this, anytime, anywhere. Net, this is the Storm collects a debt from the Empress of the Shi'ar issue, right? Like, it's pure setup, and much like Hickman's New Mutants issues were ultimately about establishing the presence of a king egg of the Brood and getting Bobby and Sam to space, X-Men number 17 is letting us know that Storm is gonna collect that debt from the Shi'ar, right? Like, this should not come as a surprise. Basically, all this issue does is it's a build so that later Hickman can do something cool with Storm where she has a debt to collect from the Shi'ar Empire. That's a pretty nice favor to have in your back pocket. Now, all this is very much in line with what we've seen teased for Storm at the end of Ten of Swords Destruction, and again recently in the Jerry Duggan written issue of Marauders and Callisto getting wind that Storm is planning to leave Krakoa for a time. And the question here becomes, why is this something Storm wants to do, and what shape will it take? Again, this is something I talked about at length in my Reign of X Theories video based on the promo image alone. I really dug into the fact that the goddess turns her eyes to the stars in Ten of Swords Destruction is clearly setting us up for Storm leaving Earth and going out into space, okay? But the details of that, I think, are open to a lot of interpretation, and that's what I hope to dig into here. This is something I talked about, again, in my Reign of X theories based on the promo image, proposing my theory in those end of 2020 videos. My theory at the time was that Storm is going to set off to the stars in a Storm ongoing, working as a cosmic liaison for Krakoa. One of the bigger problems here that I've realized, in a post-Sword landscape is why not just make this a part of Sword then, right? Why wouldn't Storm just be in the pages of Sword, which, is a possibility. I also proposed in the Reign of X theories video that Storm could potentially be out in space as the Queen of Space Wakandans, which if you've been reading Ta-Nehisi Coates' run and Space Panther, there is, a whole basically Wakandan galactic civilization. Could that be an avenue for Storm to ascend and become sort of their queen out in space as well, while working on behalf of the mutants? I think that is an interesting possibility, although, less and less likely. Now, there's also the big question here of what is Storm holding in the Reign of X promo image, okay? In the initial theory video, I posited that this could be related to the Emicron Crystal, a piece of Marvel lore from the X-Men Phoenix saga with close ties to the Shi'ar. If you know the Emicron Crystal, it has reality warping capabilities and is immensely, immensely powerful. Ironically, the idea was kind of onto something, as the reality warping abilities seem to hold, but now that Sword number 1 is out, it seems more certain that Storm is holding on to the artifact Sword recovered, aka the mysterious Mysterium. Okay, so in Sword number 1, if you remember this issue, written by Al Ewing with art by Valerio Schiti, colors by Marty Gracia, they go on this multiversal journey. It's all very, very high concept cosmic, and they come back. They being this mutant group, this mutant team of the new Sword, and they come back with this rock, and it's not confirmed. I think even at this point that it is definitely Mysterium, but or maybe it is actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Somehow I got in my head it's Mysterium. So hopefully there's something in that comic that makes it fairly clear that it is, because otherwise I'm going to do a lot of theorizing here that is based on very, very little, which would not be the first time. So what is Mysterium? My best guess, again, is it's a pull from the Mark Gruenwald written Squadron Supreme in the lesser talked about sequels to the original 12-issue maxi series. Okay, so Gruenwald writes Squadron Supreme 85, 86-ish. It's a very good Marvel maxi series. Actually, it establishes the Squadron Supreme in a way that they had not really been, definitively established to that point. And in particular, then the sequel, there's the OGN Death of a Universe. It's not nearly as good as the first 12-issue mini, but it is interesting, I think, definitely for our purposes. That connects back to Marvel 2-in-1's Project Pegasus and Dr. Thomas Leitner, aka the Nth Man, aka Mysterium. Now, in Death of a Universe, it's established that the Nth Man's abilities can traverse realities, hence a character from Earth 616 absorbing universes in the Squadron Supreme verse. In a lot of ways, this iteration of Leitner functions as a proto-Hickman's Beyonders. What does all of this have to do with Mysterium and with what's going on in Sword? Well, this same character, Dr. Thomas Leitner, later in the next sequel to Death of a Universe in Squadron Supreme, started going by the name Mysterium. So we have this individual with immense sort of reality traversing abilities and running by the name Mysterium, and then we have this multiversal object, cosmic artifact that has been captured by this X-Men Sword unit that we're referring to as Mysterium. I think those are too similar to just be a coincidence, and I think probably what this rock is going to be able to do is allow individuals to traverse across various realities. So that's the power I think Storm will be wielding. In a recent absolutely incredible oral history of 2015 Secret Wars on Sketched.com, Jonathan Hickman is quoted as saying, "I wanted to do Strikeforce Morituri meets Exiles, a book where everybody dies every issue, but in a different reality." Now, he's referring here to Avengers and New Avengers, but that sentiment is very, very interesting. Honestly, it ties in super nicely with what I was already kind of pitching here for Storm and where I see this going, right? Is a Storm Exiles. So for those of you who don't know, Exiles is a book in the early 2000s written by Jeb Winnick, and it's about various reality hopping Marvel characters. So you get Blink from the Age of Apocalypse is one of the most well-known. You get Sabretooth from that Age of Apocalypse as well, but then you get a bunch of different characters from different realities. I don't know if they're entirely mutant to begin, but they're definitely there's an X-Men mutant focus, and they go on all these reality hopping missions, okay? And then Strikeforce Morituri is an early 90s, I can't think, it's not quite Marvel, but it's ultimately owned by Marvel, and in it, it's there's an alien invasion, there's these superpowered kind of young kids who get powers, but basically their powers will
inevitably burn them out and potentially kill them. Okay, it's really interesting. Like, definitely read the first 6 issues you have before. It's an interesting work. But what I see, kind of the way these playing together in a Storm ongoing, is Storm leading like Shi'ar Super Guardian Death Commandos. I think that's the favor, right? So Storm's like, all right, I'm going to take this Mysterium, I'm going to hop realities, I'm going to be the mutant hopping across the multiverse and figuring out what's up, what are our opportunities, what's the potential for mutant longevity for the survival of our race. And I think she goes to the Shi'ar and says, all right, I need some Death Commandos. I need a team to come with me on these missions. Okay, so this becomes Storm's space team. Now, I had them hunting for shards of the Emicron Crystal in my original projection, but now it's more likely that they're using Swords Mysterium to, again, travel the multiverse on missions for mutant kind. Or, Storm could request access from the Shi'ar to the Emicron Crystal for some totally bananas reality warping fun. This could go any way. I can't even tell you how fast I'd pull this series with Hickman or any number of other writers on board. I have a pipe dream that N.K. Jemisin could be involved, and while Vita Ayala was a first favorite pick for this Storm ongoing, picking up this, New Mutants, and the alleged Children of the Atom sounds like way too much. So I'm not ruling out here that this could be a Hickman ongoing for Storm as she kind of hops through the multiverse, but again, bringing in like a powerhouse writer like N.K. Jemisin, who's doing Green Lantern Far Sector, would be an incredible win for the X-Line moving forward. But frankly, whoever gets brought in here on the creative side, it matters a whole heck of a lot, but just doing a Storm ongoing in this vein would be amazing. I would absolutely love to see this. I mean, for me, the most interesting question beyond all that is like, why is this what Storm wants to do? And I think the question kind of boils down to what we saw in Giant Size Storm, in the Giant Size X-Men series, the 5 issues that kind of started with Storm being on her deathbed, basically, like having 30 days to live because of the Vault invasion, and then coming out of that and saying, I am a mutant, I am a goddess, and I want to live. Kind of this life-affirming, like, I'm back. I was almost taken out, but now I'm back. I need to do more. And I wonder if this is kind of a moment for Storm to recognize, like, okay, I've done the lead the X-Men thing. I've done the Be on Earth thing, like over there and back again, and I want to do something more. I need to explore more of my potential, essentially, as an Omega level mutant, as a goddess, and maybe that means hopping into the multiverse and exploring like what all the possibilities are for mutant kind out there. I think that is a realm that Storm has not traveled to before, and it could be very, very interesting to see her digging into like getting a much, much bigger role in the expansion of mutant kind and kind of the survival of the Reign of X and beyond. So next up in X-Men number 18, the Krakoan reads the Vault. No surprise there. We know that this is the big, their back issue is Darwin, Laura Kinney, Wolverine, and Synch. All are coming back out of the Vault. Who knows how much they will have aged? Who knows how much they will have experienced? But I am very, very much looking forward to X-Men number 18. So thanks everybody for listening. Let me know your theories, your comments, your thoughts on what I've presented here in the comments for the YouTube video. That all helps me out a great deal. In particular, I do want to give a shout here to patreon.com/comicbookherald supporters in the mysterious benefactors tier especially. Thank you to Verisimilitude, Terra Nort, Ed Mackey, Clyde DeGlide, Pinball Drew, Mike Solomons, Matt Mahoney, Jesse W., Professor Pride, Cole Weathers, Martin Lopez, Chris Isidro, Brent Bowser, Professor X3769, and PD Appleseed. Thanks so much for your generous support. I'm Dave. You can find my stuff at comicbookherald.com, at Comic Book Herald, pretty much anywhere on social. Look for the best comics ever in My Marvelous Year podcast for more from me. Thanks everybody for listening, and as always, enjoy the comics.